In the summer of 2001, 8-year-old Lauren Kavanaugh was rescued from the home of her sadistic parents. When she was found, the girl looked like a 2-year-old and weighed only 11 kilos. Her stomach was distended from starvation, and her body was covered in sores. Lauren spent about 6 years in a dark, shame-ridden, urine and feces-stained, cramped wardrobe in the caravan of her mad parents, her mother Barbara and stepfather Kenneth Atkinson. They starved, beat, and sexually abused the girl. Lauren was systematically beaten with a paddle, blunt and sharp objects, and burned with cigarettes. Lying in the dark, she could hear her 6 siblings laughing and playing outside while she was locked up. When other family members went out of town, Lauren was locked in a cupboard. The abuse only came to light 5.5 years later when her stepfather drunkenly told a neighbor about it while his wife was away. She went to her house and told her husband, who called the police. But let's get to the bottom of this. Lauren Kavanaugh was born on April 12, 1993, in the small American town of Hutchins, Texas. By the time she was born, her mother Barbara had already decided to give the baby up for adoption. She found a good family for her daughter, Sabrina, and her husband Bill Kavanaugh. The couple were delighted to adopt a baby girl. They had always wanted a child, but couldn't have one of their own. The Kavanaughs adored their adopted daughter. Lauren's own room was set up for her to move into when she grew up. Sabrina bought lots of toys and clothes for her. It seemed as if their happiness would last forever. But after 8 months, like a bolt from the blue, the Kavanaughs received the news that Barbara had changed her mind and wanted to take her daughter back. It soon became clear that she would do so easily. It turned out that Kavanaugh's lawyer had never filed the paperwork to terminate Barbara's parental rights. So Lauren was back with her birth mother. Barbara soon reunited with his school sweetheart, the alcoholic Kenneth Atkinson. By this time, Barbara had several other children besides Lauren, all from different fathers. After the girl was handed over to her birth mother, Sabrina was allowed to visit her. She was the first to speak out about the Atkinsons' abuse of her daughter. One day, Sabrina noticed that the girl's nappy was red, and Lauren herself became hysterical when they tried to examine her. Mrs. Kovana assumed the girl had been raped. However, the court responded to the former foster mother's request for a medical examination by saying, "By your own accusations, you are doing more harm to the child than her mother is willing or able to do." After Sabrina tried to save the girl, the Atkinsons banned her from visiting 2-year-old Lauren. The little girl lost the only protector she had. That's when, in late 1995, Barbara started locking the girl in the wardrobe. Strangely enough, these were the best hours of Lauren's life. She would stare at the strip of light under the door and imagine she was in another world where there was no pain or fear. Lauren was only let out to be abused. Even when she washed the child Barbara, as if to drown her, the girl was not only beaten. Atkinson gave Lauren to a pedophile for several years. The child was barely fed. Barbara liked to put a plate of food in front of her daughter and tell her to chew it and then spit it out. This is what Lauren herself said about her childhood many years later. "My mom used to bring boys or girls home to have sex with me. If I screamed, it really pissed them off. My parents thought it was funny for them to watch. I had to do what they told me to stay alive. My stepfather would take the gun that was next to the bed, put it to my head, and pull the trigger, pretending to shoot me. Lauren only survived because one of her sisters would sneak her crackers and tinned fish. Amazingly, the other 5 Atkinson children led normal lives. Their parents looked after them. Why Barbara wanted Lauren back and why she hated her afterwards is still unknown. Mrs. Atkinson herself told the court, "It hurt me to see my other children suffering, but when I looked at Lauren, I felt nothing. Lauren was saved by her stepfather. Rumor has it that the man was angry at his wife for cheating on him and decided to report her. After 5.5 years of abuse, Kenneth suddenly revealed his little secret to his neighbors, and they called the police. On June 11, 2001, the police department in Hutchins, Texas, received a call. The voice on the phone reported that her daughter, 8-year-old Lauren Kavanaugh, was being abused in Kenneth and Barbara Atkinson's mobile home. Just half an hour later, police officers rushed to the address. They were met on the doorstep of the caravan by the owner, a terrified Barbara Atkinson. "What can I do for you officers?" she asked. But the senior officer silently pushed the woman aside and entered the van. The officer had seen a lot in his long years of service, but on this day, he was hardly prepared for what awaited him outside the door. The small, stuffy room stank, flies buzzed around the piles of dirty crockery, and Kenneth Atkinson, a drunken Kenneth Atkinson, lay curled up on the small bed. There were 6 other Atkinson children in the house, ranging in age from 22 months to 11 years. "Where's Lauren?" asked the homeowner's representative. "In the wardrobe," Barbara replied quietly and led the way out, telling the officer what he had seen. It was a frightened little girl who looked no more than 2 or 3 years old, not 8. Lauren was in a deplorable state, her hair tangled and infested with lice. Her face and body were filthy, and her stomach was distended. When I looked into her eyes, I thought she had been in a dungeon for days. I thought, "Oh my God, how can you do this to a child?" Lauren was taken to Dallas Children's Medical Center, where she was treated for malnutrition. According to the medical staff, she had peeling skin on her back and buttocks, broken teeth, and a distended stomach. In fact, she was so malnourished that her organs were already failing. According to medical experts, the girl had only a few months to live in these conditions. Her esophagus was clogged with feces, fibers, carpet, and plastic, and she could not sit in a chair, write with a pencil, or recite her ABCs. She was not potty trained and did not recognize the sun or basic objects. In 2002, Barbara and Kenneth Atkinson were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole until 2031. The Atkinson children were placed in foster care, and Lauren was returned to Sabrina and Bill Kavanaugh after the hospital. When Lauren grew up, she wrote a diary about her childhood with sadists. The girl recalled that when her mother first locked her in a wardrobe, she thought it was punishment for crying. Unknown to her, that place had become her permanent home. She remembered how they played country music to cover her screams as they abused and raped her. "I couldn't do anything in the dark. I slept there and had to use it as a toilet. The carpet was covered in urine, and I lay under a thin, wet blanket," she recalled. Lauren Kavanaugh's road back from trauma has been long and bumpy. She has undergone years of psychotherapy, doctor visits, and diagnoses. Shortly after Lauren was rescued, studies by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention showed that she faced a bleak future of antisocial behavior, crime, drug and alcohol abuse, illness, and early death. For a time, it seemed that Lauren had overcome her trauma and would lead a normal life. She went to university, where she began studying psychology and also created an online community to help teenagers like her cope with the psychological trauma she had experienced. But in December 2018, Lauren, who was 25 at the time, was arrested and charged with sexual assault of a minor. The 14-year-old girl alleged that Lauren had sexually explicit conversations with her on social media, where she encouraged all victims to seek help from her. The investigation lasted 3 years. Kavanaugh faced up to 20 years in prison. However, in 2021, all charges against Lauren were dropped, and she was sent to treatment, where she remains to this day. That's all for now. If you enjoyed the video, please support us by liking it. See you soon.